Hello guys, this is CannibalChess, and today we're going to be analyzing my game against the strongest Christmas bot on chess.com, which is Holly, rated 2100, and she has the white pieces, so she's going to start the game off with e4. I go e5, she goes knight f3, I go knight c6, and then she brings her light square bishop out to b5, just attacking my knight. And here there are a few continuations that black could potentially play that are decent. a6 is a decent idea, asking your opponent, do you want to take the knight or do you want to move back? So if they move back, then you would just push the pawn again, and then they would have to go back here, which is one idea. They could also just take the knight, and then you would just take with the pawn, and this could create a position where you could fianchetto later on. You could also push d5 at some point in the game, which would be fine for black. But also you have bishop to e7 would work, and also knight to f6. And here I like to play knight to f6 because it's the move that I know the most about. The lines after that are the ones I know the best, so that's why I play it. It's called the Berlin defense. And here if she tries to take the knight, I would simply take back, and if she tries to go after this pawn, then I have this queen e7 move. And then if she tries to defend the knight, because she doesn't want it to move, because if it moves, then I have this pawn for free. So then I can play d6, and then it has to move back to either d3 or f3. And after it moves back, then I just simply pick the pawn up, and then a position like this would be on the board where I would actually have a winning position here. So you wouldn't want to take the knight at this point in the game, which is why she doesn't. She just simply castles, which is good on her. And here I just continue development by completing its pawn chain, also making it to where my light square bishop can come out to d7 or possibly g4 in the future. It's different ideas in the position. And she continues by pushing d4. And this is an excellent move by her because not only does it threaten this pawn, but also it threatens this idea of d5 in the future, which is attacking my knight, and my knight cannot move because it is pinned to the king. So there are different ways of handling this move. You could take the pawn, obviously. You could also move your light square bishop to d7, so if your opponent plays this d5 move, next move, then you can just simply move your knight away, and then you're asking your opponent if they want to take your bishop or not. So it'd be a position like this where they could either take or move back. Or another thing you could do here is you could play a6 and ask them if they want to take the knight, and then you retake with the pawn, or if they want to move back, and then you push them back further. So those are a few ways of defending this position. I choose to just take the pawn, which the computer is saying is the best idea here. And Holly takes back with the queen. And the reason why the computer is saying that this was not the better option was because it's obviously having it to where my knight can attack the queen next move if I get my king unpinned, which is a strong idea. So here I decide to go bishop d7. And what this does is this stops the pin on the knight, and this also makes it to where I'm threatening to pick up the queen. So here Holly has to move her queen, and she decides to move it to c4, which is a very fine move. I continue by developing my dark square bishop to e7, just making it to where I can castle next move. So all my pieces would be developed at that point, pretty much except for this rook on a8, which doesn't have to be developed yet. And she continues by bringing her other knight to c3. I castle, and she tries to centralize this knight. And the reason why this doesn't work, you can't centralize this knight, especially in this kind of position. It's too early on, but also it's kind of a weak outpost at this point. I could just take the knight basically, which is what I do. I just take the knight. She takes back with the pawn, and then I make an outpost for my knight. And she can take the knight here, and then I would take back with the pawn, which is a better position for me because I have both of my rooks out, or both of my bishops out, and it's just an overall, it's just a little bit better for me, because her pawn here, it might look like it's on the same rank. It is on the same rank, but her pawn here is past defending the center. It's now attacking these squares. So there's no attack or defense on the center squares here, which my pawn is defending that square. So that's why the computer is saying that it's better for me. I just have my bishops are a little bit more active, and also my pawn is defending the center. And she now decides to bring her other bishop into the game by moving it to e3, which is it's one of the top 3 moves, so it's a very good move. And I continue development by bringing my dark square bishop up to d6, so it's acting kind of as a pawn here, creating a pawn chain. It also, at some point, if I decide to push e4, then it is also eyeing this pawn on h2, so it's getting the bishop kind of close to the king at this point, which is the idea of the move. And now she decides to bring her queen back. And I believe the idea here that she was seeing was, if I don't do anything with my bishops or my queen, then she could simply take my bishop next move, and then I would kind of be forced to take at that point, and then she would have this free pawn on b7, which I don't allow that. I see it, so I move the pawn up. So if she takes now and I move, then she no longer has this pawn. But the computer doesn't really like that move. The computer is just saying that I should just simply take here just to trade down material, and then move something like f5 would work, the computer is saying, because at this point, if the queen decides to take b7, then I have this move where I just go f4. And this is just, it's pressuring the king side so much, where this one pawn, it's worth the position that I get on the king side, because now I have these pawns marching forward. I can also move my queen up to h4 if I need to start preparing to checkmate Holly. I could also rook lift if I need to. So it would just be kind of a nasty position for Holly in general, which is why the computer is saying it's fine if this pawn falls. I didn't really want to lose material that easily, because I wasn't very confident going into this game. You know, Holly is rated like 400 elo above me, so I'm just trying to be careful. And here she decides to plant her light square bishop on c6, just going after this rook, also making it to where I'm kind of more tempted to capture, because I don't want to move my rook around too much. I mean, it's guarding this pawn that's a base of this pawn chain, and no other piece is guarding this pawn, so I don't want my rook to necessarily move at this point. So I take, which is the best move. She retakes, and now she has this pawn that's getting close to the end of the board, and I'm getting kind of concerned at this point. And there's nothing really to be concerned about yet, because this pawn chain here is very strong. There's no real way of breaking through it yet, so I don't really have to be concerned about it at this point. And here you may have noticed, yeah, I moved king to h8, and the computer is saying it's the best move. And I like when I find these moves. There are a lot of these moves that you could, if you like analyze your own games, sometimes this pops up where the best move is just to move your king to the side. And the reason why this is because on this square, it is on the same diagonal as this queen. And if you noticed in the earlier line that I showed where the queen takes b7 and then you pawn push f5 and then f4, that's kind of a main idea in this kind of position. And if my king is on g8, then I can't push because the pawn is pinned to the king. So by moving my king to h8, it makes it to where I can possibly push this pawn at some point in the game, which would be a strong idea in an endgame. So that's why it is the best move. I'm very happy I found that move. And Holly continues by pushing h3. I think just trying to make some breathing room for the king, which doesn't really make sense, which is why it's an inaccuracy. It doesn't make sense because the dark square bishop, my dark square bishop, is cutting off this square if I ever decide to push e4, so it's kind of an illogical move at this point. The computer's saying better would have been to push this pawn down, I believe, just trying to open up this file, possibly get at the queen side. But Holly doesn't do that, which is fine. She pushes h3. And here I mistakenly bring my queen to h4, a little bit premature, I believe is the computer's thinking. The computer's saying that, yes, I should have pushed f5 at this point and then potentially maybe brought my queen up a few moves later when I had some pawns to support the attack. But just bringing your queen up closer to your opponent's king, it doesn't usually do anything. The queen doesn't really have any way of attacking the king usually if no other pieces are supporting the attack, so that's why the computer's saying it's a mistake. And now Holly wants to get her rooks into the game, so she brings her rook on the A file onto the D file, just to kind of eye this dark square bishop, because she kind of wants it gone at this point. She wants to get rid of it, so then if I take, then she now has a passed pawn that she could potentially try and promote, so that's why she's doing that. And here, as I've said in one of my previous videos, there are two kinds of blunders. There's a blunder of material, and there's a blunder in position, and this one is a blunder in position. So why this is a blunder in position is because it's fine for her to take here, and once she takes and I retake, then this file is now opened up for this rook. And what's important that's on this file is this pawn on c7, because this is the only thing defending this pawn from coming to c8 at this point in the game. So this allows Holly to get her rook on the 7th rank, which is a very, very nasty idea that I did not see when I played this queen b4 move. But she did, so she brings her rook down to d7, and I find this move where I can just bring my bishop back to d6. And this captures her rook in a way. I mean, the position is still better for her by a little bit, but this in a way captures her rook, because the rook can no longer take this pawn, the rook can't go here, the rook can't go here, unless Holly wants to trade in a way that would make it better for me. The rook can't go to d8 either, so the rook potentially has no moves at this point. And so what Hollybot tries to do is she tries to open up this file again to make it to where it's now open again. This pawn can now be attacked. So she tries this by bringing her other rook to attack my bishop twice. And here I just simply respond by bringing my king back to g8, because I like my position here, and at this point I really didn't know what to do. I didn't know if this would be a mistake or not. I didn't really know what moves I should and shouldn't do, so I just simply did a waiting move just to see what she would do. And she actually makes a mistake here of capturing my bishop, and this makes the game even again. So I just simply take the rook, which is a good trade for me. I got my bishop off the board, but I got a rook. And now she decides to not take this pawn immediately and decides to play this move instead. And this, again, is also a blunder in position, because this move is not needed at this point in the game. I don't have a dark square bishop that's attacking this h2 square anymore. So there's really no reason of pushing these pawns at this point. I mean, even if you were to push this pawn, you should at least push it twice to get it closer to my king side, like if you're going to push the pawn. But that's not the point of the position right now. The point of the position for Holly should be to get this pawn promoted as fast as possible. And the computer is suggesting to just move the pawn to c7. But she doesn't do that, she misses it. And so she blunders by moving g3, which gives me the opportunity to bring my rook to attack this rook. And if she had played this move prior to playing this move, then I would no longer have had something like d8. So because if I would have played d8, then she would have just, it would have been mate in 2 basically. She would have just captured, checked me, and then I would have to take, and then it would just be over. But because she misses that, I have the opportunity of attacking her rook, and here she just tries to attack my rook twice, which doesn't make any sense at all. She should have moved her rook out of the way to keep any advantage that she had of this pawn coming down. She kind of lost her advantage at this point because I can just shut her dark square bishop out. It now no longer has any good diagonals to go on to help this pawn go down to the 8th rank. So after she moves it back, I just simply take the rook, which is forcing my opponent to take back, and now I can just simply take the pawn. And this position is completely winning for me. I have a rook for a bishop, which is always better, well, usually better for in-games, and I am also up 1 pawn. So this is a completely winning in-game for me. I was a little bit nervous playing against a 2100 bot in an in-game that I wasn't too familiar with, but I tried my best, and I just played moves that made sense. So you usually want to bring your king up first to just gain control of the center of the board. And here she brings her king back, which is to start pushing these pawns on the queen side. So it needs to be there to defend against me pushing my pawns. And I just decide to grab the only open file on the board, which is usually a good idea in any position where it's a pawn in game with rooks. You usually want to take the open file because then you can at some point get at your opponent's king. So she just starts marching her pawns down. I bring mine up, and here I kind of want her to try and play this move, because if she plays this move, then I can just take, and then if she retakes, then I can have this pawn push right here. And what this does is if she decides to not take the pawn and play g5, then I now have a passed pawn. But if she takes the pawn, then I can get my king up here, and then I can start threatening this pawn as well. And then I will have created another passed pawn, which I can just win the game with easily. So I want her to take the pawn here, but she doesn't go down. She doesn't play that. She just continues to attack on the queen side. So I bring my king up here just to try and see if she's gonna try and play this at this point, which would be a total blunder. If she played that, then I would take, she would retake, and then that would be a even more winning position for me. So she just starts to try and get away at my queen side, and I just start taking her pawns, and I create another open file in the game. And this one is a little bit better suited for rook attacks because it doesn't have any pawns that are blocking the file. So I get in on the 3rd rank here, the same rank that the king is on, attacking this pawn, also potentially attacking this one if I need to. And she decides to guard the pawn. And here I just bring my rook over here to attack this pawn. She defends it, and now I check the king. And at this point, I'm going to win a pawn here either way, because if she decides to move her king down, I'm going to take this pawn. If she decides to play bishop there, then I'm going to, at some point, win this pawn as well. So I continue to push my pawns here. She pushes hers, and I'm trying to make it to where she runs out of pawn moves, so she has to either move the king or the bishop. And so we create this position where she's kind of forced to move her king or bishop. If she moves this pawn, then I'm going to take with the king. She can't move this pawn. If she moves this pawn, then I'm just going to take and then have another passed pawn. So she has to move the king or the bishop at this point. She can't move the bishop because it's pinned to the king, so she moves the king. And this is where I find this great idea of finding a way to capture the bishop. and it starts with this move d4. And she decides to take, which is the best move. I retake, and there's an amazing idea here where she basically has to take the pawn and give up the bishop. Because if she doesn't, if she plays something like this move to try and hold onto the bishop while also keeping this pawn from marching forward, I can simply push again. And if she decides not to take again and move something like here, then I can just push again. And then if she decides to move here, I just promote, and she basically has to take at that point, and then I get the bishop for free anyway. And if she decides to move here instead, and then I push the pawn, it results in the same thing. So she figures at this point that she basically has to take the pawn. She sees what's going to happen, so she takes the pawn. And I take the bishop for free, basically. And here she tries to go after one of my pawns to get her pawn promoted. I pick up her pawn, start marching my other one up the board, and I make sure to have my rook on the same file as this one in case she gets to the 8th rank, and then I can just take. I'll just sacrifice the rook and then get a queen on the board and just easily beat her. So she doesn't even get the pawn down there in time. I get another queen on the board, I take the pawn, she goes after my rook, I just bring the queen down, and then I just slowly ladder mate her. And it took me quite a few tries to finally beat her. It might have been 10, something like that. But when you're playing against opponents that are higher rated than you, this is what I found out basically, is it's better to try and not beat them in a positional game. This wasn't necessarily a positional game as much as it was just trading material, basically. Up until the last part of the game, of course, then it was positional. But you want to get, if your opponent is higher rated than you by quite a bit, then you want to get them into an end game, because you're probably more comfortable playing an end game than playing a middle game. Middle game, there's usually a lot of tactics, a lot of blunders. Late game, like end of the game kind of stuff, it's usually more simple. You don't have to worry about as much stuff, so you can focus a little bit more. And this is what I found out by playing Hollybot. And the accuracies at the end of the game, just so you know, she had 80.8 and then I had 88.5. And also I had another game that I played against her where I drew against her. We had like 93.5 and I had like 93.6, something like that. I was thinking about showing that game instead of this one just because it was higher accuracy, but I kind of thought it would be a little bit boring just because it was a lot of the position was very closed. It was a lot of just pawn pushes for the most part, and it just kind of ended in a bishop pawn in-game kind of drawing position. So I kind of thought it'd be boring even if it was a higher accuracy game. So I just decided to show the one where I actually beat her. And so I hope y'all learned something valuable out of this video. I hope this helps you beat other bots that you want to beat in the future. And I hope y'all have a great day. Thanks.